The House will come to order. Members will be at their seats. The clerk has opened the roll and you may record your presence. Please rise and give attention to our guest chaplain, Representative Schrader, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Representative Vickery.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's pray. Our Lord and Heavenly Father, we come before you today with thanksgiving and praising you for your power and your majesty, thanking you for all your love for us and the blessings you provide, thanking you for the rain and the promise of spring. Thank you for sending your Son as a sacrifice for all to take away our sins and provide redemption. We also know that you are in control even when things seem out of control. You have appointed leaders among us, and I ask that you bless them with wisdom and knowledge to guide our decisions. Help each of us to recognize you as the creator of all, and that nothing exists without you. Once again, guide us in the decisions we make for the state of Kansas. Be with Eunice as she undergoes treatment, give her strength, and be near to her. And finally, Lord, bless this legislature and do your will through the policies we move forward. To your honor and glory, I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Has every member had the opportunity to record his or her presence? The clerk will close the roll and take the attendance. The chair recognizes Representative Brim on a point of personal privilege.
Yes, please. That would be great. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year, we listened to several stories that involved some of our current legislators. If you have been affected from someone who has experienced as a kidney donor or a kidney recipient, would you please come on down and join us? Be it hereby known to all that official recognition is extended in honor of Kansas Kidney Awareness and Organ Donation Day. Most of you do not know that I was diagnosed with chronic kidney failure at the age of 27. Thanks to God, amazing doctors, and medications, I am here today. So you're kind of stuck with me. On March 20th, 2018, organizations promoting awareness of chronic kidney disease, dialysis, and organ transplantation are providing education about the risks of kidney disease and blood pressure screenings. Early and accurate identification of kidney disease is a critical component of efforts to reduce the negative health and economic impacts on Kansans. One organ donor can save the lives of more than 8 people. In observance of March as National Kidney Month and April as National Donate Life Month, we encourage all Kansas legislators and residents to honor organ donors and those living with chronic kidney disease. Today, I would like to honor several people: Alonzo Jameson, Colleen Jameson, and Shekinah Bailey. Most of you know Alonzo as a KU basketball player, and he was a star from 1988 to 1992 there. I also know him as a father. I had the honor of teaching his twin daughters, Olivia and Elise, in first grade. Now they're in college. About 4 years ago, Alonzo went on dialysis because of end-stage kidney disease brought on by diabetes. Many people were tested, and he couldn't find a match. One day, Shekinah Bailey saw a post on Colleen's Facebook page. They work together sometimes. These are his words: "Not only is this a bad situation for him, for a standard of living, but as a society. This is a huge drain on our insurance. When you start to look at all these different factors, it just hit me in the face that this is a no-brainer. Why are people not lined up to help people out? This one we can actually cure. We can fix this." So, Shekinah is a living donor, kidney donor for Alonzo, and that is why Alonzo is here today. In addition to that, we have a couple of other people who came here to join us as well. We have Tom Weathers, who is also a kidney recipient. And last but not least, we have Pat Avia. And she actually is, I won't say the oldest, she's our most vintage living kidney donor in the state, and she came almost 6-hour drive to get here today. In the gallery today, and throughout the Capitol, if you haven't been down to the first floor, we have the Kansas Kidney Coalition, National Kidney Foundation, serving Western Kansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri, and the University of Kansas Health System Center for Transportation. Mr. Speaker, I ask that my words be spread across the journal.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you.
Messages from the governor. The clerk will read.
House Bills 2362, 2435, and 2106 have been signed into law. Approved on March 20th, 2018. Jeff Collier, Governor.
Messages from the Senate. The clerk will read.
Senate non-concurs in House Amendment Senate Bill 275 requests a conference has appointed Senators Longbine, Billinger, and Rogers as conferees of the part of the Senate.
Majority Leader Heineman. For a motion to accede to the request of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate non-concurred with the House amendments to Senate Bill 275 and has requested a conference committee. I move the House accede to the request of the Senate and that a conference committee be appointed.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. The chair appoints Representative Kelly, Powell, and Finney as conferees on the part of the House. Representative Prael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate made some changes in House substitute for 2194. I would ask that we non-concur and a committee be appointed for conference. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there discussion? Representative to move your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move my motion.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. As conferees for the House, the chair appoints Representative Prael, Francis, and Lusker. Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2454 passed through the House, deals with juvenile dispositional hearings and some timelines. The Senate engaged in certain mischief with this bill and made some changes that I believe we should give some consideration to. That being the case, I would move that the House non-concur in the Senate amendments to House Bill 2454 and that a conference committee be appointed.
Is there discussion? You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. As conferees for the House, the chair appoints Representative Jennings, Whitmer, and Heiberger. Representative Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2042 was the bill that we had on the reciprocity with that the Attorney General had asked on the concealed carry. It passed the House and the Senate amended it, of course. They took a perfect bill and created an imperfect bill. So, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House non-concur and that the Senate amendments and that a conference committee be appointed.
Is there discussion? You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carried. As conferees for the House, the chair appoints Representative Barker, Highland, and Ruiz. Representative Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2145 was the domestic violence gun bill that we passed by 120 to 0 in the House. The Senate put several amendments on it that this body has not reviewed. So I would move, Mr. Speaker, that the House non-concur in Senate amendments and that a conference committee be appointed.
Is there discussion? You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carried. As conferees for the House, the chair appoints Representative Barker, Highland, and Ruiz. Representative Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2476 is a alcohol beverage bill that we passed in the House 107 to 15. It also included the alcohol candies. The Senate has amended that in several different ways, but particularly they went from ours 0.05 to 1%, or not more than 1%, which ABC thinks that may be in violation of federal law. And since we always try to color within the lines, I would move, Mr. Speaker, that the House non-concur in the Senate amendments and that a conference committee be appointed.
Is there discussion? You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. As conferees for the House, the chair appoints Representative Barker, Highland, and Ruiz. Majority Leader Heinemann.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of considering those items appearing under the heading of General Orders.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. The chair appoints Representative Phillips, the chair of the Committee of the Whole.
Good morning, body. Let's begin. The first item of business is House Bill 2625. For purposes of carrying House Bill 2625, the chair recognizes Representative Whitmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments. I move the adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. You may continue.
All right. This is not an attempt to lower the sales tax on food. Let's start there. I know. House Bill 2625 is now the third attempt, and hopefully the final, to resolve an issue with CPost and their records. House Bill 2625 came to us from the Kansas Judicial Council and would amend existing law to specify which records must be maintained in the CPost registry and under what circumstances certain records may be disclosed and to whom those records may be disclosed. The originating agency would still be free to release the information if they chose to do so, and the final results of CPost investigations will continue to be released as is current practice. The committee did make a few technical amendments, as well as amending the bill to require that records in the registry other than investigative files shall, rather than may, be disclosed. Proponents for the bill were the Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, the Johnson County Sheriff's Office, the Kansas Judicial Council, the KBI, the Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police, the Kansas Sheriff's Association, the Peace Officers Association, the Highway Patrol, the Fairway Police Department, and the League of Municipalities. There was one opponent, an ad hoc member of the Kansas Judicial Council, and there is no fiscal effect of the bill. Again, this is the recommendation that came to us from the Judicial Council for a problem that's been lingering for 2 or 3 years now. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Representative Heiberger of Douglas.
I would like to make a slight correction to the information you just offered. It's my understanding that the Kansas Press Association was an opponent in this bill, and I believe that's getting, and they're still an opponent. So, members of the Democratic Caucus, I would like to apologize. I provided you some misinformation this morning. I stated that the Kansas Press Association was on board with the bill after the committee amendments. I spoke with a representative this morning. That is not correct. They opposed the bill. Although on the surface, the bill appears to provide increased access to records, they believe that it closes off some access to records that they've been able to access through the Kansas Open Records Act, specifically records involving misconduct by police officers where a decertification proceeding has not occurred. You're not hearing me? Okay. Again, my recommendation to our caucus this morning was to vote for the bill, but based on my discussions with the Kansas Press Association this morning, they believe that the bill still, that it actually closes off access to records that they've been able to access through open records requests, and they oppose the bill, so I'm changing my recommendation to a no.
Is there any other discussion on the matter? Seeing none, Representative Whitmer, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do thank the committee's ranking minority for that correction. In statute, it says that, quote, the registry shall be made available only to those agencies who appoint or elect police or law enforcement officers. This now fixes that. This is the recommendation that came to the committee from the Kansas Judicial Council, and the committee did pass this out favorably, and I encourage the body to support the bill. And thank you, Mr. Chair. With that, I move when the committee rises and reports, they report House Bill 2625 favorably for passage.
You have heard the motion by Representative Whitmer to report House Bill 2625 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. No. Division has been called. The clerk will open the roll and you may vote. Has every member had an opportunity to vote? The clerk will close the roll and take the tally. 87 having voted in favor and 29 against, the motion passes. We will now move to the next item of business is House Bill 2103. For purposes of carrying House Bill 2103, the chair recognizes Representative Epley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments, and I move adoption of the committee report.
You have heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The motion passes and the committee report is adopted. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After yesterday, I'm pleased to report that the representative of Sedgwick has already gone, so I think we've got that out of our system for today. So we'll move on to House Bill 2103, which is a substitute bill. Then when this bill came out, it was basically came out as a mandate bill for insurances to all mandate and provide coverage for eosinophilic disorders, and it was for essential or elemental amino acid formulas. These formulas are very, very much needed for health conditions as they relate to FPIES syndrome, eosinophilic disorders, which includes eosinophilic gastritis, eosinophilic esophagitis, and SBS, which is short bowel syndrome. That is a long list of issues that it covers, and it covers a wide array of elemental needs. These formulas are essential for basically infants and toddlers that suffer with these diseases at that time. Fortunately, FPIES syndrome is something that you outgrow. Short bowel syndrome is something you do not outgrow. Short bowel syndrome is something you may be stuck with for your entire life and have a feeding tube and have to have these formulas for the balance of your life. The committee, I believe, at first had hoped to make this an insurance mandate, but knowing the flavor of the committee and where we were, we realized that that was untenable and that would not pass out favorably. So we went a different route and decided we would try a test track, and that's the bill you have before you today, is for a test track for the state employee plan to run from 1/1/19 to 12/31/19, with a report coming back from the Health Care Commission pursuant to the requirements of this bill to the Senate President and the Speaker of the House of Representatives that outlines how it went, how much money it cost, and then perhaps in the out years we can look at making this a mandate going forward depending on the will of the body. I want to report to you that this is desperately needed for vulnerable Kansans, particularly infants under the age of 6 months. This is when often these diagnoses are made. And it's a very, very small minority of patients, as you can see if you read in your fiscal note or in the bill brief. For example, in the state of Kansas, it's estimated that there's less than 100 folks that suffer with these various diseases. So it's a very special, select form of folks that deal with this type of diagnosis. And in the state plan, it would be as few as, I believe, 19. And so the fiscal note as outlined before you is for about $160,000 for this coming year, and then $339 and then $359. And that's probably where it's going to level off. Now, someday I would like to stand here and report to you that we're going to make this a requirement for other insurances. But I think we need to take this first step, and so I would hope you would support me in this first step. Thank you, and I'll be happy to stand by for questions.
The chair recognizes Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The carrier of the bill did an excellent job in describing what it does, and I think one of the things that we need to know is that for young children, the other option is to have a tube put in and have to have treatments every day. And the thing is, insurance is paying for them to go to a medical location for this treatment, but they're not paying for the ability for parents to provide this formula at home without having to go through surgery to get a tube and the inconvenience of going back and forth for treatment. So this is really something that would end up saving money overall for those kids that the formula would work. Second of all, it's much more efficient and helpful to those families that have this particular need in their family. So I would hope that you would support this effort. This actually started in 2017. It came back to us this year after a study over the summer. Even though there are not a lot of people affected by this, those that are is very traumatic. So thank you very much, and I support House Bill 2103.
The chair recognizes Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment.
If the amendment is there, let's see, would you care to explain your amendment, please, Representative?
Yes, sir, I'd be happy to. I would, for the body's reference, I would reference House Bill 2021, which many of you may recall was championed by former representative from Olathe relative to requiring hearing aid coverage on insurance plans. This amendment would merely incorporate the provisions of that bill into this already good bill, and I would stand for questions.
Is there objection to waiving the reading of the? There is objection. Clerk will read.
Page 1, line 5, before section by inserting new. On page 2, following line 3 by inserting new section 2A. The provisions of KSA 402249A and amendments thereto shall apply to the provisions of this section. B. On and after July 1, 2018, every insurer that issues an individual or group policy of accident and sickness insurance providing medical, surgical, or hospital expense coverage and that is delivered, issued for delivery, amended, or renewed on or after July 1, 2018, shall also provide coverage for hearing instruments, including necessary batteries and repairs fitted or dispensed by person authorized by law to fit or dispense a hearing instrument. C.
The objection has been raised. The chair recognizes Representative Swab.
Would the carrier of the amendment stand for a question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So this is the hearing aid bill from last year, correct?
Last year being 2017, it was introduced this session.
Okay.
Last year, and there was a hearing in the insurance committee January 31st of last year.
Was there a fiscal notice associated with the bill from last year?
That I can't tell you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Representative. The reason why the bill is in the form that it is today, that during the 90s we were doing health insurance mandates, and so what they did is they created the health insurance mandate track. And what the track was, the first thing you do is you do a cost study, and then it's implemented into the state the state employee health plan, and then when you get sure costs from that, then you would implement it statewide as a mandate. That's how we did the autism mandate that we have today. And so what happens is when you do it this way, you're jumping in front of the line. So the folks that were bringing the amino acid bill are obeying the track that the legislature set up, and what the amendment does is cut in front of them and they go directly to a mandate as opposed to going through the track. And so the reason why the bill never really passed, because it would constantly cut the process and go directly to a mandate as opposed to going through the process of the people who have worked hard on their mandates, like the autism mandate. At least they did, hey, they did their study first, and then they implemented it through the Kansas State Employee Health Plan, and then it became a mandate statewide. This amendment tells those people we get to cut in front of you with our hearing aids as opposed to doing the study. The bill has never been introduced as just a study first bill, and that's why the bill never advanced, because there's a fiscal note associated with it. And we don't know for sure if the fiscal note's going to be accurate because we haven't implemented it in the state employee health plan. So my recommendation is to go ahead and turn down the amendment because there is a cost associated with it, and the bill could be introduced as a study first like they have with the amino acid bill today that's actually obeying the track and not cutting in line. With that, I would ask for your opposition to the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes Representative Hodge of Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This body does a lot of studying. This body would study whether or not the sky was blue if it saves some money. This is a situation where we have folks that don't have the ability to hear. And this is something that we can pass, whether it jumps the line or goes through the process. So I urge you to support this bill.
Chair recognizes Representative Epley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, again. I strongly oppose this amendment because while this was a bill that was alive last year and it was reintroduced this year, we've not worked it. The fiscal note on this, it was extremely high, and it really does jump over many other needs in our state. And, you know, as I've gotten a little more mature, I've learned that slow but sure sometimes is a lot better way to go than to jump forward with a huge mandate of this nature. And while I appreciate the merits of what the author of the amendment's trying to promote, I think it's too much too soon. I think it needs to go back through committee. I think we need to rework it, maybe look at it in the form of a test track. But I would strongly oppose this amendment today, and I just want to keep this bill I'm trying to present today as a clean bill and at least be 1 for 1 after 2 days. Thank you.
If there is no further discussion, Representative Miller, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I fully appreciate the remarks made by those opposing the amendment, and I'm not trying to pit one group against the other. I'm trying to champion what I believe is a good cause. We had a proclamation today, or we had a discussion during points of personal privilege relative to a particular malady, diabetes. I'm one of the lucky ones that suffers from that malady. It's covered by insurance. I have a long list of maladies. I suffer from heart disease. It's covered by insurance. I'm also lucky in that I am not hearing impaired. And I'm lucky I'm not hearing impaired because that's not covered under our insurance policies. And for those people who do suffer that impairment, it's very expensive. I believe in insurance because insurance takes the harsh reality for an individual and spreads it across all of us so that it is not a harsh reality. We share in the expense of maladies like heart disease, like diabetes, and I see hearing impairment as no different, and it shouldn't be whether you're the lucky one or the unlucky one to suffer the cost. I'm sorry that the representative who championed this bill for so many years is no longer a member of this body, but I do believe in his cause, and someone needs to take it up, and whether it's today or later, whether it's fast track, slow track, it's the right way to go. I hope you'll support the amendment today because it will send a message across the way and throughout this body that we believe this impairment should be addressed through insurance coverage. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank the indulgence of the body. I move my amendment.
You have heard the motion by Representative Miller to amend. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. No. The noes appear to have it. Division has been called. Seeing 15 hands, a roll call is in order. Has every member had an opportunity to vote? The clerk will close the roll. Are there change of vote? Representative Lusk votes yes. Go ahead and call the vote. 39. Representative Landwehr votes no. We ready? Representative Becker votes no. Any other changes? "38 having voted in favor and 83 against, the motion fails. The clerk will record the vote. The next item of business. Oh, yes. Sorry about that. Getting ahead of myself. All right. Seeing no further discussion, Representative Epley, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for thinking of vulnerable Kansans. And so, Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it report House Bill 2103 favorably for passage.
You have heard the motion by Representative Epley to report House Bill 2103 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. The next item of business is Senate Bill 375. For purposes of carrying Senate Bill 375, the chair recognizes Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There were amendments to Senate Bill 375. I move the adoption of the report.
You have heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The motion passes and the committee report is adopted. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and colleagues. This bill is concerning the regulation of traffic related to the length of vehicles, some combination of vehicles, gross weight limits, as well as emergency vehicles. This bill was amended, and it adds specific exemption to limits of vehicle weights and lengths. It would authorize the operation of emergency vehicle at a gross weight not exceeding 86,000 pounds and subject to the maximum weight on axles of 24,000 for a single steering axle, 33.5 for a single drive axle, 62,000 pounds for a tandem, 52,000 pounds on a tandem rear drive steer axle. This bill also defines what an emergency vehicle is for this purpose as a vehicle designed to be used under emergency condition to transport personnel and equipment and support the suppression of fires as well as the mitigation of other hazardous situations. This bill also adds an exemption from the limits of the lengths of vehicles and vehicle combinations that are operating under Kansas public roads to allow a towaway trailer transport combinations not exceeding 82 feet in length. This bill defines a towaway trailer transporter combination as a trailer transporter towing unit and two trailers and a semi-trailer with a total weight not exceeding 26,000 pounds. The reality is, colleagues, that this brings the state into compliance with federal law under the FAST Act, the Fixing America's Surface Transportation. At the time, there was only one proponent, that was KDOT, no opponents, no neutral, and there is no fiscal note to this bill. I stand for questions.
The chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for the delay. I suspect you'll probably still want to hear from our ranking member because I don't think he and I are in agreement on this bill. The bill does two things. Number one, of course, it does provide for heavier load limits, if you will, for emergency vehicles. That's a good idea, but ironically, last night I was reading the after-action report from the Highlands Fire in Reno County last year. And one of the problems in fighting that fire is that the bridges were in such bad shape that the engine companies, etc., had to drive around trying to find a bridge that was good enough shape to cross so they could put out the fire. That's a sad situation. But the real reason I'm here is to express my reservations about double and in particular triple bottom trailers. Those of you who drive up and down the turnpike to come to and from work here every week realize how those vehicles are swerving and swaying, and although there are circumstances when they are taken off the turnpike and perhaps other roads, it's a dangerous situation. And having represented two families who lost loved ones as a result of double and triple bottom trailers, I have serious reservations. So for today, I'll be voting no. Perhaps someone can convince me differently by tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The chair recognizes Representative Lusker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do rise in support of Senate Bill 376. It does bring us, as the carrier of the bill loudly said, it does bring us in compliance with the FAST Act. And in regard to the doubles and triples on the interstate, those are only allowed on interstate and within 20 miles of the interstate. So hopefully that addresses some of those concerns, although they are allowed on the interstate. But the underlying bill has more to do with emergency vehicles as well as tow-away trailer transports combinations. So I do rise in support of Senate Bill 375. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If there is no further discussion, Representative Rogers, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this should be a simple bill, and it is. Some of the concerns raised by my colleague from Sedgwick are not in this bill, and it is simply a matter of trying to define and get into compliance with the Federal FAST Act. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports Senate Bill 375 favorable for passage.
You have heard the motion by Representative Rogers to report Senate Bill 375 favorably. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. The next item of business is Senate Bill 398. The chair recognizes Representative Horn. You may proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were no amendments in committee. Senate Bill 398 was brought to the Health and Human Services Committee from the Kansas Board of Cosmetology. This bill lowers the requirements for the senior status cosmetology license. Current law entitles a person who has held a license issued by the Kansas Board of Cosmetology for at least 40 years and who is more than 70 years old and not regularly engaged in cosmetology practice in Kansas to a senior status cosmetology license. Senate Bill 398 would amend the law to require that the person has held a license issued by the KBOC for at least 10 years and is 60 or more years of age. The senior status cosmetology license costs $30. It is a one-time lifetime fee. They can no longer practice cosmetology with this license, but it allows them to purchase cosmetology products for their own personal use at a discount. Therefore, it provides a small cost savings for Kansas senior status licensees. There are minimal projected losses in revenue, which the Board of Cosmetology is willing to absorb. With that, I will stand for questions.
Representative, I think you have identified a lot of interest in your bill. The chair will recognize Representative Concanon.
Thank you. Yeah, would you come? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you come forward for some questions?
Sure.
Did you do your homework on this bill about cosmetology?
Yes.
Do you believe that there should be a requirement for hair length to be in the legislature?
No, I do not think that is appropriate.
Are you aware there are often frequent secret ingredients in cosmetics?
I was not aware of that.
Well, just for your information, were you aware that there's kratom in face powder?
I did not know that.
What about THC in night cream?
I did not know that either.
I don't think you did your homework. How about hair color is derived from chicken feathers.
That's news to me as well.
Well, I'll put my gray envelope away because of this doesn't really seem germane to Medicaid expansion, but anyway, congratulations on your first bill.
If there is no further discussion, Representative Horn, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, colleagues. I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports Senate Bill 398 favorably for passage.
You have heard the motion by Representative Horn to report Senate Bill 398 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. This concludes our general orders. The chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we rise and report.
You have heard the motion to rise and report. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The motion passes.
The clerk will read.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee of the Whole recommends substitute for House Bill 2103 and Senate Bill 398 be passed, House Bill 2625 and Senate Bill 375 be passed as amended.
Representative Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. I move adoption of the Committee of the Whole report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. The committee report is adopted. Reports of Standing Committee, the clerk will read.
Committee on Insurance recommends Senate Bill 348 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Insurance recommends Senate Bill 410 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Appropriations recommends Senate Bill 276 be passed, and because the committee is of the opinion the bill is a non-controversial nature be placed on the consent calendar. Committee on Appropriations recommends House Bill 2773 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Federal and State Affairs recommends Senate Bill 307 be amended by substituting a new bill to be designated as House substitute for Senate Bill 307 as follows. An act concerning amusement rides, relaying the Kansas Amusement Ride Act, relating to limited use amusement rides and registered agritourism activities. Substitute bill be passed. Committee on Elections recommends Senate Bill 57 be amended by substituting a new bill to be designated as House substitute for Senate Bill 57 as follows. An act concerning certain statewide elected officials, and the substitute bill be passed.
Are there announcements? Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Congressional Prayer Caucus will meet upon adjournment in 251 South, the Governor's Conference Room. Thank you so much.
Representative Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Wyandotte Leavenworth delegation will be having lunch today in room 152 South. Thank you.
Representative Dirks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday we had to leave quite suddenly in order to make it to a meeting, and unfortunately we were not able to welcome one of our own back in the House, Representative Gallagher. Welcome back.
Representative Garber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Energy, Utilities, and Telecom will meet tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock for the purposes of working Senate Bill 279. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague from Saline County beat me to it. This is my second day back after an extended illness of 4 weeks, and I just have to say, you all are a sight for sore eyes. If those of you who don't know, I had an emergency appendectomy on February 20th, which was the first day of the 3 days that the House was on the floor all day, working bills before turnover. And I left, we had lunch break, I went to emergency care finally, and thinking I would get a diagnosis, get a prescription, get it filled, get back to work in the afternoon. And 5 hours later, I was in surgery. So word of the wise, if you have abdominal pain for 2.5 days, get it checked out sooner rather than later. But seriously, I want to thank everyone for all your messages of support, all your prayers, your cards, emails, messages, Facebook, phone calls, and the flowers. Oh my gosh, my room smelled like a floral shop. The first time I was in the hospital, I had a second go-round. The reason it lasted so long, I thought I was doing better and I thought I'd be back to work after 2 weeks. And then some secondary infections set in, so put me back in the hospital for 6 more days. And I'm on the road to recovery. I'm still being pumped full of antibiotics every day, but I'm feeling very good, and it's just wonderful to be back. Again, I want to thank everyone for everything you've done to help me get through that ordeal. And it really, really bothered me to miss all the votes that I missed. I'm a pretty conscientious legislator, and it's just the way it is. But it's wonderful to be back in the saddle now. Thank you.
Representative Concanon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republicans will caucus tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in the old Supreme Court room. Thank you.
Representative Smith.
All right, folks, give you a warm invitation tomorrow morning, once again, for our Capitol Commission Bible study. Romans chapter 8 will be in room 141 South at 7 a.m.
Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rural Caucus will meet tomorrow. The subject will be nursing homes in rural Kansas, so I hope to see you all there. Thank you.
Representative Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the body, House Judiciary Committee. We are back, baby. We're going to meet today at 3:30 in our normal room, so if anybody's looking for something to do, come on by.
Representative Pam Curtis will replace Representative Jeff Pittman on the House Transportation Committee today, March 20th only. Representative Jason Probst will replace Representative Jeff Pittman on the House Agriculture Committee today, Tuesday, March 20th only. Representative Blake Carpenter replaces Representative Joe Sywert on the House Agriculture Committee, March 20th. Representative Scott Swab replaces Representative Dan Hawkins on the House Taxation Committee today, March 20th. Representative Jesse Burrs replaces Representative Christy Williams on the House Appropriations Committee tomorrow, March 21st. This appointment expires at the end of tomorrow. Representative Whipple.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the Democratic Caucus, we will have agenda tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Thank you again, Mr. Speaker.
Majority Leader Heineman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Body, looking ahead to Friday, I have bad news and good news. Bad news is I'm anticipating putting 4 bills above the line. The good news is I anticipate we will gavel in at 9 a.m. and get it over with. So, Mr. Speaker, and also Republicans, we will have calendar review this morning or tomorrow morning, following caucus, whenever that is. So, Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until Wednesday, March 21st at 11 a.m.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. We are adjourned.